looking at you, I can't imagine how Eli's going to feel when he sees this picture of all of you supporting him as he goes through this battle. Eli is one amazing young man that has so much joy and life that he brings to our campus and has brought to our campus over the years. He currently is fighting a battle that only a bone marrow transplant can tackle. So yesterday he endured that bone marrow transplant and successfully went through that process. So today, you know, he is recovering. He's starting a whole new beginning to his life. They're actually calling it his new birthday today. So we decided to celebrate that with him and show our love and support. So we are wearing hats today as a fundraiser, and then we grouped up together also to spell his name on the field, Eli, and raise our hands in joy and support so that he can feel that from the hospital bed. And we certainly hope he does feel that because it is in our hearts.
We are one big happy family. Eli's gone here since preschool. I've gone here since kindergarten, so we really have grown up together as of everybody else. Even if you come here in 4th grade or 5th grade, we still bond with each other like awesomely. So having one of our family members be in trouble, that's really we take it in our hearts. So we're just really trying to care for him and just be here for him as much as we can.
From an early age, we're taught the basics of budgeting from our family. Do your chores and earn an allowance. Save what you earn so that you can pay for what you need and hopefully have some left over for a rainy day. Those lessons carry over to when we're adults and earn a salary and pay bills every month. School finance isn't so simple, and few have a complete understanding of how it works. In the next few minutes, I'm going to provide a crash course in school finance to help you better understand how our schools are funded. Schools receive their funding from the following sources: local property owners, the state of Arizona, and the federal government. Local and state sources provide about 90% of the funding, and around 10% comes from the federal government. But here's where it starts to get complicated. Every dollar that comes into our schools has rules attached to it that mandate how it can be spent. Funds from the state are split into 2 buckets: maintenance and operations in one bucket and capital in another, with 97% of the funds in maintenance and operations and 3% of the funds in capital. Maintenance and operations funds pay for daily operations of our schools, including salaries, transportation, utilities, and general supplies like paper. Capital funds pay for durable items that are owned or used by the school for many years, like buildings, furniture, buses, textbooks, and technology. All districts are required to have a balanced budget and cannot spend more than is provided in the 2 buckets. If the money in either of the buckets is not enough to meet the needs of our students, the district can ask the local community to pass an override or a bond. Overrides and bonds are different, and the funds they generate add to the different buckets. Overrides are for the maintenance and operations bucket, and thanks to our community, an override passed in November 2015, which allowed us to bring back free all-day kindergarten and provide salary increases for our staff, as well as support invaluable resources, such as nurses, arts education, reading programs, gifted education, athletics, and extracurricular activities. With voter approval, the Peoria Unified School District may also sell bonds, but cannot exceed a set amount. They work similar to a line of credit and fund capital projects that have a useful life longer than 5 years. Does school finance make more sense now? I hope so. But if you still have questions or want more information, you can find all of the details of our past and present budgets and expenditures online, or just give us a call.
Guys, just from standing here looking at you, I can't imagine how Eli's going to feel when he sees this picture of all of you supporting him as he goes through this battle.
Eli is one amazing young man that has so much joy and life that he brings to our campus and has brought to our campus over the years. He currently is fighting a battle that only a bone marrow transplant can tackle. So yesterday he endured that bone marrow transplant and successfully went through that process. So today, he is recovering. He's starting a whole new beginning to his life. They're actually calling it his new birthday today. So we decided to celebrate that with him and show our love and support. So we are wearing hats today as a fundraiser, and then we grouped up together also to spell his name on the field, Eli, and raise our hands in joy and support so that he can feel that from the hospital bed. And we certainly hope he does feel that because it is in our hearts.
We are one big happy family. Eli's gone here since preschool. I've gone here since kindergarten, so we really have grown up together as of everybody else. Even if you come here in 4th grade or 5th grade, we still bond with each other awesomely. So having one of our family members be in trouble, that's really we take it in our hearts. So we're just really trying to care for him and just be here for him as much as we can.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:03. I would like to first start with a moment of silence for our Oasis community and family, and then we're going to follow with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Thank you. And today we have the privilege of having two honorary guests leading our Pledge of Allegiance, sons of Miss Corey Underhill, Jackson from Sunrise Mountain High School, who's a junior, and Rex from Frontier.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Moving on to 3.1, address agenda and consider adoption of or make recommendation changes to the agenda presented. Governing board members, is there anything you would like to change? Thank you very much. We are going to proceed as presented, and we're going to start off with 4.1, staff recognitions. Ms. Danielle Airy.
Good evening. President Ceja Martinez, members of the board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson, and our guests who have joined us this evening.
From an early age,
would like to
we're
take
taught
just
the
a quick
basics of
moment
budgeting
to
from our family.
recognize
Do
our
your
new
chores and
board
earn an
member and
allowance.
returning
Save what-
board member. And of course, we had this lovely reception for them this evening, excuse me. Before we do, we have a couple of individuals that have joined us in the room tonight, and I do want to take just a quick moment to recognize them. First, Council Member Ray Malnar from the City of Glendale is here with us this evening. Thank you for being here. I believe I saw him. Did he sneak out? He was with us, so we thank Councilmember Malnar for being with us tonight. We also have with us former State Superintendent with us, as well as a former governing board member, Mrs. Diane Douglas. So we'd like to thank her for joining us tonight and recognize her for being here. So thank you, Mrs. Douglas. It's wonderful to see you back in this room again. Feels like just yesterday that you left, right? Well, thank you. And thank you to all the guests that joined us for that reception that we had earlier this evening. I want to especially thank our food and nutrition department who put together the spread that you had there before you. So a big thank you to our team over there that just does wonderful work. Welcome back, Mrs. Pingarelli. I know this is our second board meeting of the new year, but we still wanted to take a moment to celebrate you, and then a big welcome, of course, to Mrs. Underhill. And I know that both of you have family in the room this evening, and I thought you might want to take just a quick moment to introduce them.
Sure. So in the back, I have my husband, Mike Underhill, and my son, Jackson, and my other son, Rex.
And I have my husband, Peter, who I dragged to almost every single board meeting for the last 4 years, and hopefully for the next 4 years. So thank you.
Thank you. Just a warm welcome again to both of you, and we're glad to have you complete the dais.
Thank you for that. And just to add, we have a couple more guests from other governing board members joining us. Ms. Jean McGrath from the Maricopa County Governing Board. Thank you for joining us. Community College, excuse me. And we have Ms. Barbara Wiley from the West Meck School Board. Thank you very much. And I did see him, but I don't see him anymore. Yes, he was. Everybody's disappearing on us, so. Oh, and Dr. Peter Pangarelli, but from also who serves on the governing board. So thank you all, everybody, for your service. We're going to start with board recognitions, and Ms. Underhill, would you like to start us off?
Okay. I wanted to just talk about a couple of things that I attended that were great. I wanted to commend Dr. Sievertson and the athletic department and his interns for doing an excellent job providing the all-district ceremonies the last week for volleyball and for football. Just really cool to see them bring those kids out and their parents and their coaches and really recognize the awesome work that they do. So that was great. And I also wanted to commend our district spelling bee contest participants. That was fantastic. It's scary. I can't imagine, having to do that, but they did a great job and just wanted to commend those organizers as well. So thanks.
Ms. Pangarelli.
I have nothing this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Sandoval.
Sorry, I took a drink of water right at that moment. But no, thank you. So I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Corey just said. We talk about our great programs here in Peoria, and one of those programs that I want to recognize this evening is PSBN with Dr. Sievertson and Mr. Yoder there out of Liberty. They attended a national conference recently where there was like 400 directors and athletic admin that attended and who were very impressed just by the depth of this program and certainly how well thought out it is and how it continues just to evolve and adapt, based on technology and certainly, student input. That said, going into the fall of 2018, they recorded and were involved in, I think, like 147 different events, from sporting events to CTE programs, robotics programs, graduations, student profiles. But I think what's important to understand, which is relevant, across the district, is how this program truly engages our students and puts them on a path to be successful, certainly in that career path. But from what I understand, they're realizing national recognition, stemming from the conference that they attended. And when I take a look at that type of program that individuals are just so impressed by, that certainly defines leadership. And I think that defines the Peoria Unified School District, how we are forward-thinking and innovative. So, I'd like to really just thank Mr. Sievertson and Mr. Yoder, for their leadership and certainly continuing nurturing our students' creativity and putting them on a career path, that aligns well, with their individuality and passion. So, well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stone.
Well, I would like to, I'd just like to say I'm grateful to the parents that spend a lot of time working with students, that reach out to us when there's a problem, that are involved. You see a lot of parents that don't really care to get involved because they don't I think they don't really understand how important that is. But I really have enjoyed working with parents in the past few years and seeing those that are passionate about their children's education, and it makes a big difference to the student. So thank you all the parents that are involved and work for their students.
Thank you for that, Ms. Stone. I do have three things, and to segue into that, Ms. Stone, I had the opportunity, I joined Oasis PTSO meeting. I saw it on Facebook, and they were inviting the community to see the president and forgive me, I have her first name, Alicia, and our principal there, Ms. Dogood, lead a group of passionate parents, and they're about to celebrate their 30th anniversary. And to see the process is just as good as the result. So thank you for those PTSO parents, as you were highlighting, Ms. Stone. I also attended the football district awards. I do want to highlight one statement that one of the coaches from Liberty High School stated, and I think it's very relevant to what we are about to discuss tonight with the governing board, is he stated that the process is just as important as the outcome. And I think that that phrase for me has hit home for all of 2019, and I wanted to definitely highlight that. And the last thing was today, I saw a student post last semester on Twitter about Centennial High School's interview day, and when I responded, they reached out, and I had the privilege of interviewing a large group of students. And thank you to Ms. Jenna, Eli, and CTE for hosting that event. What I wanted to share, and this is for the governing board and administration altogether, is when I interviewed them, I asked them one particular question, and I was blown away by their response. What would you like to see in a leader or a manager that you serve on in the future? And the characteristics they highlighted were all soft skills. They said they want a leader to be passionate for the organization. They want somebody who's going to rally the team, work as a unit, easy to talk to, and have a willingness to help. And the fact that they were able to articulate that, really, I wanted to share that with the governing board and the administration as we continue to move forward on the decisions we have to make. Any other recognitions by the governing board?
Yes, thank you,
And
Mrs.
Superintendent.
Sayas-Martinez. I have three of them also. Tim Beck earned the 400th win as an Ironwood boys soccer coach against Dobson High School during this winter break. Tim is the second coach with the most wins of all time in the state of Arizona. So that's pretty impressive. Congratulations to Coach Beck. Students throughout Peoria celebrated the 100th day of school. And then if you saw social media, they did it in a variety of ways. Some counted to 100, depends on the grades. Others did a variety of other things aligned to curriculum. So pretty good. I can't believe we're on the 100th day. That's a little crazy. And then we had the Unity Walk, which also took place this week. It was spearheaded by the city of Peoria, and many of our students were involved, and they participated in this event, which celebrated the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So good stuff, all good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. All right, moving on to 5.1, public comment and request to address the governing board. On items not presented in the agenda, we do have, a student, Christopher Whittigan. I saw him earlier. Oh, there you are. Come on up. I had the privilege of interviewing Mr. Whittigan, and I look forward to where you go in your future.
All right. Hello? Hello? Okay. All right, so I'm here today to talk about a matter that I discussed with Monica Martinez earlier, and that is a voter registration drive for high school seniors. Now, the Peoria Unified School District is an organization that is for the students, for the youth of the community, and in order for the district to continue its job in serving the students, the youth must share their voices on matters of importance to them. Like right now, how I'm here at this board meeting. And so last election, the bond election, it was a lot better than the one before, but it was still very close and was not able to get passed. And one of the issues is that was because there's very low youth voter turnout. And so I was wanting to lead this voter registration drive for the high schools. And the average age of a person in this area of the district is 36, while the average voting age is 56. And I feel like there should be a lot more representation from the youth community in deciding those bond elections and those local matters that pertain to them. So I wanted to first start out with Centennial Voter Registration Drive. In order to do this, I wanted to work with my administration. I already reached out to the student council at my school, and I want to work with you guys, of course, to make sure that everything is good so that we can try to implement this throughout the other high schools. I wanted to try to start this in March with Centennial and then continue it throughout that month and through April to register high school seniors or anyone else who's old enough or who will be old enough to register to vote for the next election or bond election. So if you are interested in supporting me in this endeavor, please reach out to me after this meeting or whenever. So thank you.
We appreciate your time, Mr. Whittigan, and just to clarify, items not on the agenda, we cannot have dialogue, but I'd be more than happy to provide Ms. Linda Pellis-Thompson or Ms. Airy to follow up with you, so thank you so much. There aren't any more additional items. We're going to move on to the consent agenda item. Governing board members, are there any items that you would like to pull? I do have two. We need to pull 6.3, the Human Resources Report, and 6.6, the new course proposals for AP classes. And at this time, I will need a motion for the consent agenda excluding those two items.
I move to approve the consent agenda minus, can you give me those numbers again?
6.3 and 6.6.
6.3 and 6.6.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Pengarelli and a second by Ms. Stone. I appreciate your patience. Everybody. Looks like everybody on our end. Do you have anything up over there? Oh, Miss Stone. Oh. There we go. Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. Items moved into 7.1 will be Human Resources Report. We do have a request to speak by Dr. Teresa Aries.
Let's go back to those items.
Thank you, Board President and the Governing Board of Peoria Unified School District for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. And I'm going to read because I get talky. I can. I've written something so I don't get too off track. Thank you for your time this evening. You will see my name listed as a request for resignation on this evening's agenda. I wanted to address the board personally regarding my request. I have a doctorate degree in special education, a master's degree in educational leadership, a dual bachelor's degree in special and elementary education, and have held national teacher certification as an exceptional needs specialist for children with disabilities birth through young adulthood. I have served as a teacher, a Title I coordinator, a special ed director, federal grants coordinator, assessments coordinator, and elementary school principal. When I interviewed for the position at Country Meadows Elementary School, I shared my desire to use my education and my experience in a leadership role for Peoria School District. I was told by the principal that I would be hired as a 6th grade resource room teacher as it held the lowest caseload, so that that would allow me to effect positive change and necessary change to the special education department at Country Meadows. Instead, I was initially given 44 students, which is over twice almost twice the caseload of a typical resource teacher in grades K through 8. That was subsequently altered when a long-term sub agreed to enter into the teacher in residency program and was given the 5th and 6th grade students. The extraordinary responsibilities for the first semester of school were extreme. However, I made suggestions for positive change to the department, and those recommendations were rejected by the principal. Subsequent decisions made caused additional problems for the department. The culture and the climate at Country Meadows under that administration the first semester was unbearable, which led me to seek career advancement opportunities outside of the district and within the district. The week before break, I had a conversation with the assistant principal regarding my aspirations and a concern for one of our students. She shared with me that the district was looking into developing an alternative school for students in grades kindergarten through 8th grade to support our students who were unable to be successful in the general environment. I sent a letter to the superintendent and applied for the assistant principal position within district. During break, I was asked to interview for the director position of a K-8 alternative special educational program and was offered that position. Although it's a temporary position, I immediately notified my supervisor and explained my intent to gain the experience and knowledge needed to help Peoria build a program within this district, hoping that I could return with the experience, knowledge, and understanding needed to lead that program here in this district. I spoke with Human Resources as well about the desire. Without hesitation, I told him that I would definitely be willing to interview for any positions within the district and stay within Peoria. This has not been an easy decision for me. The culture and the climate at Country Meadows has improved exponentially since Ms. Headings has taken over the leadership. I do not want to leave that environment. If the culture and climate before break was reflective of what it is now, I would not have been looking for a career advancement until the end of the school year.
Thank you very much. We'd be more than happy to continue the conversation. If you want to follow up, we can set a meeting to continue the conversation.
I just wanted to say thanks because I love Peoria.
Thank you so much. And to respect everybody's time, again, just to reiterate, we have a 3-minute per our policy. So with that, we have 7.1 that was pulled that we need to have a motion and a vote. It was originally 6.3 and we pulled it for the consent agenda and we moved it to 7.1. Because we had pulled 6.3 because it was to discuss and then yes. So we can do a voice vote. Are you okay with that? Okay. I move to approve 6.3 Human Resources Report. A motion by myself and a second by Mr. Sandoval. Ms. Douglas, we have new systems. They don't work the way they used to. Thank you for your patience. Okay, perfect. We'll do a voice vote. Oh, you saw it over there? Okay, it was a unanimous yes on 7.1. 6.6, a request to pool. We received information on making recommendations on future AP courses that are going to be offered from the district. I appreciate the time, Mr. Savoy, that you spent discussing with me. What originally raised concerns was it was interest only at Centennial High School, and he further elaborated that what is being presented are future opportunities for our students to have access to other AP classes with the potential to take the AP exam. When looking at this coursework, I want to just highlight two things that, one, we've had this conversation with Mr. Croto in AP classes, is that students are highly encouraged to take the AP exam for their benefit as well, to reduce their financial costs if they were to pass the test for college credits, and then as well as a benefit for the district so that if more students pass it, we as an organization receive more funding to offer those types of coursework for our students, and our teachers have access to more resources. So I wanted to highlight that we continue to highly engage the AP exam. The other piece is equity. Taking a look at the courses offered across our district, a lot of AP classes are more north of bound. We want to make sure that every student has access to every single one of these. And if they don't have the ability to drive, or if there's a transportation issue, that if they have interest, that we figure out a way that they have access to these AP classes. So I just wanted to highlight that I support giving more choice, but make sure there's equity and that we encourage our students. So, Ms. Underhill, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I think that what the district is trying to do, especially with the AP capstone piece, is really critical and important, especially looking at the other schools in the state that do offer that. They tend to be the very highly performing high schools in the state, so I just commend that effort and hope that we can continue to move forward with that.
Thank you. Any additional comments by our governing board? Okay, so we'll go ahead with a vote. I will move that we approve the recommendation 6.6 for new course proposals. Motion by myself and a second by Mr. Sandoval. Please vote. All in favor say aye. 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 All opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. In 8.1, discussion and consideration of an administrative appointment. Dr. Carter Davidson.
Good evening, members of the board, President Sam Martinez and Superintendent Pals Thompson. Tonight we come to you, again, I always highlight that this is a very exciting opportunity and time for me to ask our board to consider an administrative appointment, in particular for this individual at Sundance Elementary School to serve as assistant principal. As you may remember, Mr. Patterson did retire recently, so we had an opportunity to explore both internal and external candidates to bring you tonight who we believe is the next and exciting and shining star here as a Peoria administrator. So I'll hold for a second before I read my script if you guys would be interested in please supporting that, making a motion and then moving us forward.
I need a motion. Just for clarity.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we need to state the name because what's presented to us, there's no name, or do you want us to read as presented?
I would prefer read as presented. However, I did put this information in our board packet, so hopefully you had a chance to see that. I certainly, if you would like me to introduce that person first, I would gladly do that. I know that typically, though, we do the motion first.
Okay. All right. Okay. Would you like to read it for us, please?
Motion to approve the recommendation.
Kristen Doyen. Thank you very much. So we do need a motion. I appreciate your support. I will go ahead and, since I heard it, I move to approve the appointment of assistant principal at Sundance Elementary, Ms. Kristen Doyen.
Second?
We have a motion and a second by Ms. Underhill. All in favor? Well, go ahead and do a voice vote again. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Davidson.
All right. Thank you, board members and Madam President. I'll go ahead and read our script here, and then we'll invite Kristen up. And if you have any questions for her, certainly she will answer those for you. So it is recommended that Ms. Kristen Doyen be appointed to the position of Assistant Principal at Sundance Elementary School to support Mrs. Silva there. Mrs. Doyen has recently served as K-12 ELA Curriculum and Instruction Coach starting in 2018. Since 2008, Mrs. Doyen has also served in the roles of teacher, data analyst, and high school coordinator, and curriculum writer within other districts and states. Mrs. Doyen holds both specialist and master's degrees from Valdosta State University and a Bachelor's of Arts degree from University of North Texas. So I'd like to invite Kristen up, and as she joins us up here, also introduce Master Sergeant Brad Doyen, her compadre, altruist. I told him today that we really appreciate his support as she enters her new role. So thank you for your service, sir, and Kristen, come on up.
President Seha Martinez, members of the board, and Superintendent Linda Pallas Thompson, I simply want to say that I am elated to have the opportunity to continue to serve our Peoria family in a new capacity, and I am excited to support the teachers, the staff, the principal, and most importantly, the students at Sundance Elementary. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you on behalf of the governing board, and please let us know how we can continue to support your journey. Is there any additional comments, governing board?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson. Moving on to 8.2, discussion and consideration of repurposing the former Challenger Center. It's a building on the Sunrise Mountain property. Mr. Croto, and then this is the correct time. If you wanted to exit, please feel free to do so and enjoy dinner, or you can enjoy the conversation.
Get complex when everybody leaves when you come to the podium, but I get it. President Seha Martinez, members of the board, Superintendent Pallas Thompson, I'm here tonight to present to you the repurposing of the former Challenger Center. If you remember, I will give you some history, the process tonight of history. I'll talk about the community forum that we had, a committee meeting that took place with some of the information, our decision process, and a recommendation for the governing board to consider this evening. First of all, history, going back to November 30th. We did have a study session on November 30th about repurposing of the Challenger Center. At that time, we took direction from the governing board about gathering more information for the repurposing. Specifically, we had a community forum. We did do that. That was held on January 9th. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then we also had a committee or a group, focus group put together to look at the feedback and kind of give us some feedback on the entire process and what their recommendation would be for that building. The community forum, like I said, was held on January 9th. We had 37 participants at that meeting. We started at Sunrise Mountain that evening. We had provided them some background on the process of the forum and where we were at, and kind of walked them through the whole piece and why we were there. After that short presentation, we did tour the facility. We took groups, we split up into groups of about 8 people apiece, 8 to 10 people apiece, and walked through that. And then at the conclusion of those tours, we stayed around on that bottom level in the rotunda and took feedback. We talked to all the participants. We took feedback from the community and from everybody that participated. They had forms to fill out, and we did all that, answered any questions about the building that we could. So that occurred, like I said, on January 9th. Right after that, we had a group that was put together. to kind of review. It was an inclusive group involving all kinds of stakeholders, from community members to employees to administrators to people that run different programs in our district that we were a consideration for that building. We got together and we discussed all kinds of options for that building, and we wrote them all down. I'll show you something about the decision model, but we used a decision model. I can't take credit for that. That's our superintendent that came up and used the model before, so it was a great model. Brought everybody to some great discussion and focused us in on making the decision. Here is a kind of a copy of that model. It's not the actual model. This all would fit on the screen, but it looked like this. So across the top, you had all the possible uses for that facility. Like I said, there's more, but they don't fit on the screen. I just wanted to let you know how the process worked and what we went through. We also looked at some criterion. What should be included in the decision? And we had that feedback from that community forum on Wednesday, and we had a long discussion with this group that got together on that Friday and talked about all the different criterion. What they did then towards the end of that day is they based. We talked about excluding some of the options on the top because it just didn't fit that building, or there were program leads there that decided that facility wasn't for them. And then we had them rank those to their number one process, number two, number three, and then rank the weight of the criterion. That gave the official points, and it came down in the spreadsheet with points based on each of the different decisions that we could make regarding the facility. So the top two that came out of there were many. We had a rich discussion. Our superintendent was there to discuss and listen, along with, like I said, a very diverse committee. The top two that came out of that discussion was an arts facility, to use that as an arts facility, and I'll explain that and talk about it, and the Peoria Flex Academy. We did cross numerous paths with all different kinds of uses, but the top two that came out from that group are the arts facility and the Peoria Flex Academy. They felt that would be the best use for that, and that we should pursue those two areas. Like I said, though, and you saw on that decision chart, there were numerous things that were discussed that day and went back and forth. They met as groups. They talked. We broke that committee up into little groups. They discussed back and forth. We mixed up the groups so they could have different discussions, and those were what the two topics came out. The benefits, why they felt the Peoria Flex Academy could go in there. Obviously allow growth for the program. As you know, the program shares Old Main with the Met. They are both growing. They're doing a fantastic job at growing those programs. It allows us expanded credit recovery opportunities in our district. It can allow for some growth. Obviously has a community connection to it and helping credit recovery in our community and providing outlets for some students that struggle. And it's a long-term district solution. We know we're going to need credit recovery. It's going to be important in the future, so it's a long-term solution. The arts facility, some of the big things that we discussed in that committee is creating classroom space up north. As you know, our discussions have gone back and forth about, since the bond did not pass, that we need to start thinking in the future about creating space up north. This would recapture some of the arts classrooms. The idea would be to move, and Mr. Panzer explained that whole thing to you in the study session on November 30th, but free up some of those classrooms, move that into the space, and then free up some additional classrooms at Sunrise, giving them some additional space for the school and allow growth. Community connection in the evenings, so not just hold classes there during the day, but start making that community connection to provide some arts programs in the evening for our community members, and place where they can go and do different kinds of arts that would be provided there. Definitely one of the top pieces was the innovative and the fit of this building. As you all know, the building is unique, to say the least. It has a mural in there that the governing board agreed would stay. which poses some problems really for some of the programs that would go in there. And it is an art-type building. It has unique space, unique angles. Although it looks giant, it is not a huge space. It's 25,000 square feet, but there are not 25,000 usable square feet for classroom space. And all the classrooms are different angles and all that. So the group thought that's the best fit, was the arts facility. And then student achievement, our AP art offerings. And Ms. Sehar Martinez mentioned earlier the equity to offer AP programs across the district. One of the problems that occurs sometimes with AP programs is you do not have enough students to fill certain AP classes. So fiscally, we do not offer them because there would be 1 or 2 students in a class, and that doesn't really work in a business model for us. This allows us to create AP art offerings and offer that to every student across our district and house them out of there. So I know Mr. Panzer is very passionate about getting that done and providing those. And a lot of times, to be honest, those classes don't happen in our high schools because of the scenario I just described. There's 1 or 2 people, so they might be placed in an Art 3-4 class or an Art 5-6 class as an extra student to complete the AP portion of it, but they don't have per se a class that focuses just on them. So that was one of the huge things that they saw with the art facility. The recommendation, based on all the information received and processed, the administration recommends the governing board approve and repurpose the former Challenger Center to be used as the arts facility for Sunrise Mountains, and the expansion for a community arts program, which will have some use in our community and definitely some revenue generating means. So with that, I will stand for any questions and answer anything you might want to know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Croto, and your team for providing all this information.
Thank you.
Well, no comments from the community at this point. And again, this isn't an item that the community can publicly address. At this time, Ms. Pingerelli, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all your hard work and having the community come out, give their feedback. I do have some specific questions. For this I know we've talked about money in the past, and no matter what goes in there, it's looking like there's going to be $600,000 just to do the bathrooms and do the basic things it needs to before we put anything else in there. So I just want to know, where is the money coming from to fix it, no matter what we put in there?
Our CFO will answer that for you.
Thank you.
President Sehar Martinez, members of the governing board, we do have capacity in our 2012 bond and the remaining bond dollars that could be used for the renovation. It is on a high school campus, and there is a category for high school renovations in the bond program.
Okay. Yeah, I was going back to, I know our January 5th meeting, where we had talked about the money that was left in the bond, and there was $27.4 million had left, and the district is holding out money for different areas. Alarm system, $2.2 million, safety, $3.9 million. What was left over is $9.5 million, and that is to be divvied up between all of the schools over 3 years, which, if I'm calculating it correctly, looks like it's only going to be about a little bit less than $80,000 per school per year for 3 years. And that's kind of what we have left to play with. So my line of questioning is really on the fiscal responsibility of what we do with the building and what is the best fit.
And if I can interject?
Sure.
Ms. Pingerelli, the purpose tonight would be to get a direction, obviously, and that process would be to start engaging an architect if we get a direction from the board. And I am determined to come back to you before any money is spent, obviously minus the architect, but they've done a lot of work on it, and to update you on the costs once that architect is there. So this is not kind of a free ticket to go spend all the money. I would keep the updates coming as soon as we found out, okay, we think it's going to be this much, or that we've bid this much, and so we can all make those decisions along the way. So
Okay.
that is the plan.
I know from our past conversations, the architect is about 25 or 30,000, so I want to
Well, we put 39.5 in, that's what we did last time.
Okay.
But we don't think it's going to be that much. Don't hold me to that, because it's been a while now, but they've done a lot of the legwork with that building as we went down that road with the Met last time. So a lot of that legwork is done. We're hoping that, and we feel they can use a lot of that legwork. We just have to tweak some designs. So it'll be faster and hopefully a lot cheaper.
Okay, yeah, 39,000 is pretty much what's allocated for one school for 1 year, so I want to make sure we make the right decision, and from my perspective. Also, I know we had spoken on the January 5th meeting, and I had asked to, if we just use the facility for general education classes and not move the arts classes over, what the increase in capacity would be. And my rationale is that I would like to see the most increase in capacity, since we do have growth in the north, for the least amount of costs. So I know if we move the arts classes there, we're going to have to renovate Sunrise Mountain High School, those classrooms. So there is a cost to that. So I would like to see if we would have, and I know I've been in there, our kids was in there a number of times. It is a very unique shape building. But I just wanted to see the numbers of how many students that we could get in there if we had general education classrooms, and how many kids we could get in there, what the capacity would be increased if it was general ed classes in there or if there were art classes in there. Because if we go the art way, it definitely is going to cost more, because we're going to have to renovate Sunrise Mountain High School.
President Sehar Martinez, Mrs. Pingarelli, I know that we could fit about 6 or 7 classrooms, regular classrooms, into that Challenger Center. That would be the max if we turn that into regular classrooms. Is Rob here? Do you want to discuss your plan with how many kids for art? Would you like to do it? And then, so the renovation would occur at Sunrise, where we would turn some of the classrooms into 2 classrooms. So they have big, giant art spaces right now.
Right.
And we could put up a wall in those areas and make 2 classrooms, so gain 2 rooms out of 1.
Okay.
And Rob can talk about his numbers a little bit more with that.
So let me just add, using my background data, I had a conversation with Mr. Savoy for if we're using a 30 student per classroom, and we're saying 6 to 7 classrooms times 30, 21 to 18, 200, 180, between 180 and 200 students that we would service with regular ed. That's what I'm looking at.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's where I can start my base. Thank
And
you.
that would be the same, Mrs. Sayas Martinez, in the arts. It would be the same concept.
Okay.
So you'd be servicing those children in a different building. So you've expanded by the 175, regardless of what class you put in there. You could turn it into a math annex too, and do computation at night. But either way, you're adding the capacity to that. I know I'm going to interrupt you for a minute, Mr. Panzer. You can talk. I might be wrong, but I thought there was a number I heard you talking.
Certainly. You are going to gain some additional classrooms if you move the building around a little bit, in the sense of moving the arts classes out of the building on the main campus and into that. You would gain that 6 to 7, and those 200 to 240 numbers are very accurate for general education classrooms. When you move and talk and start to discuss inside of the Challenger Center, you're actually talking somewhere around 5 classrooms to 6 classrooms, depending on how you do that. So you are going to have an increase. with that somewhere in the neighborhood of the 150 to 200-ish students to do that. Obviously, the main difference in something like that is the idea of what an average classroom space is. A general education classroom on that Sunrise campus where the arts classrooms would be coming out of are about 950 square feet. Obviously, a 950 square feet arts classroom is not going to be a classroom that's really usable. Most of the spaces on that campus are well over 1,300, 14, up to 1,700 or 1,800 square feet in some of those spaces due to the needs of the programming that goes into them. So the Challenger Center certainly has the ability to accommodate that and maximize that unique kind of space. So you can move those buildings into there. So there would be some repurposing. When you talk about a building that has in the main campus, a building that in a space that is 1,800 square feet, that has the ability to be subdivided into those 950 square feet rooms and do some architectural work inside of there. Minimal work to add some walls there, and work to take down walls to increase sizes of the spaces inside of the Challengers.
So, Mr. Panzer, so if the students, the art classes move over, there would be an increase, and then you change the art rooms to like 7 classrooms, you're increasing 200 to 240 students, is that? Okay.
And obviously, until an architect would look at the stuff inside of the, the main campus, you would be in that 200 range, yes.
Okay, so if the general education, if the art students stay at Sunrise Mountain and general ed comes to the Challenger, it would be 150 to 200.
Somewhere in that range, that is
Okay.
correct, because you would have one classroom that would be different because you are talking about larger spaces now.
Okay, I'm just trying to get
Absolutely.
the bottom line. And then also, has there been, I know we were talking about the potential evening classes. I guess, has there been have you looked at the need from the surrounding area or the cost analysis? Because if you're having it open, you're going to have somebody there to maintain it. It'll be more wear and tear on the building, so I don't know if you can address that.
I certainly can. Thank you. I'm happy to do that. There certainly is potential for the evening with many different groups coming into that space, everywhere from interest from the city of Peoria to a number of other individuals and organizations that would like to come into that space. You're talking about creating spaces that are unique, and having the ability, if you look into the city of Peoria's Get Active catalog, there are many, many community education programs that they offer throughout the city. And if you look at some of the footprints that they have and available space that they do not have space in the north part, and they've actually reached out to our district specifically to ask for art spaces in general on the campus. So there certainly is a need. From a cost analysis perspective, have we run the numbers on how much that would be? We have not, but that's certainly, once we have those spaces and know what those are, we would be able to get out and market with our community to bring more organizations onto and into that building.
Thank you. I think that's it right now. Thank you very much.
Ms. Underhill. Okay. Mr. Sandoval?
Yeah, so Ms. Pingarelli, and I agree with you on the kind of dividing the remaining balance and how that translates per campus, right? But I think just as important is understanding what that remaining balance, the remaining key priorities that we have, right, within that bond, and making sure that, we're still able to address those. So less than a per campus figure, but more of we have this much stuff that we still need to do, whether it's around safety or IT, et cetera, making sure that remainder accommodates those line items. Does that make sense?
President Seja Martinez, Mr. Sandoval, at the retreat on pardon me, thank you. At the January 5th retreat, when we talked about the priorities and the allocations of remaining budget, what we shared from a breakout perspective for roofing and HVAC and those types of categories would not be impacted by the $1.5 million.
Right, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
May I continue? Perfect. Mr. Croto, quick question for you. The decision process, I like I'm going to call it a rubric, and it's probably not the right term, but when we take a look at looks like 8 different I guess, options across the top, right? My question is this: how was the community informed of those programs, what they do for the district, the impact on the district? So when they made a decision and went through their grading, I guess, process, that they were very informed on those programs across the top.
President Cesar Martinez, Mr. Sandoval, we did cover quick preview in that community meeting of the programs. Again, we answered questions for them that they had after the event. And some of the ideas that they had actually came from the community. We did not give them all to them. We gave them some that were talked about already. We previewed those with the committee real quick to tell them about what the programs are and what the programs were. We did that also with that group that met on Friday. We previewed all the programs and we took input from that group that was also additional to that. So the groups that we had already up on the screen, we provided the input about what those programs were, how they ran, what they did. The additional ones, we just added on to that group because that came from the community. If that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. One of the things that I just, want to make certain of that, and we've talked about this before is, as we take a look at considerations on how we move forward as a district, right? So where we're known for our forward thinking. The arts programs that we have are unparalleled, without question, for certain, right? An arts annex or arts facility, as you went through this process, is that program the best program or the right program to continue to put our students in a position of success for the next 5-10 years, right? Some things we talked about were coding academies, et cetera. But, again, I've always been a proponent of the arts programs, and I know the soft skills, around those programs and how they do impact, the confidence and adaptability of our students. But as we take a look at the data and just across the district, is that program, certainly the program that we should be looking at right now to really add and enhance within the district?
President Cesar Martinez, Mr. Sandoval, we actually had those discussions. One of the big things was the fit of that building and how it could be used effectively and most cost effectively. Some of those programs, as you know, when we discussed earlier, moving the Met in there requires huge changes to that building, massive changes, which means a lot of money. So the committee and the people that spoke felt, we have some of those programs that exist in our district, and maybe we need to look at beefing up or changing some of those programs. For instance, the Met has some pretty innovative avenues that teaches kids that. If coding is something that the direction of the district we want to go to, maybe we add that to the Met and not change an entire building just based on having the coding. So those are discussions that occurred with different groups and different people in there. We really tried to say, okay, how can we solve the most problems in our district? And one of them was getting space in the north. It kept coming back to that. We need classroom space in the north. We need to be looking in the future. So how can we do that? How can we have something for the community to use too, rather than just create those classroom spaces? And those were kind of all the discussions that came around that the group had.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the credit recovery thought?
Sure. The credit recovery, as I mentioned earlier, and Sybil's here if she wants to talk about her program too. It's a growing program. They're housed together at Old Main. Met and Flex Academy are housed together. So one of the problems was to try to separate them so we can get some growth. Again, the building is unique. And to use that situation, the committee, it was one of the two top choices, to tell you the truth. And the committee felt that it could be used for that. Was it the best? I think they felt the arts was the best after talking to them, but that the Flex Academy would be a consideration. So, it is a need that we have also to separate those two programs and let them continue to grow.
Gotcha. Look, I mean, when we take a look at a global perspective with regard to this facility, yes, student attainment, success, achievement, and also how it'll be used to, with regard to our, certainly our partnership with the city of Peoria and how they may integrate some of their programs and becomes a revenue generator. I think you guys have had those discussions with the city. I agree, as we take a look at, finalizing which direction we go in, the financials, are certainly a big consideration. But I don't know if this fits or not, but, there was a board meeting that I brought up, alternatives to suspension, right? And what we do with our students when they are suspended from school for a matter of, 3 to 5 days, what are we doing to change that behavior? I don't know if, there's, a spot or a position at the facility for, those types of programs, but, I just, throwing other ideas out there, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. Ms. Stone.
Yes, Mr. Croto, I do have a couple of questions. Now, you were mentioning the offerings of art classes, and sometimes the classes are not full. So with that, if we make the academy, are the classes going to be full?
President Cesar Martinez, Ms. Stone, I believe we are hoping that the increased exposure across our district, so rather than pulling from one campus, we can pull from multiple campuses, that it'll become more economical to fill those classes. So to answer your question, it's our hope that we get more than 1 or 2 students for an AP art class from multiple areas and have that a little bit more full, so that economically we can afford to offer that and pay a teacher and do those things for kids. And Rob would like to add?
Thank you, President Cesar Martinez and the governing board. I do have actually some data on that. We have over 900 students who are currently enrolled in level 3 or level 4 classes, which are students who would be eligible to be part of that AP programming. So if we look across the district at something like that, even if just a small population, say less than 10% of them would come from across the district, it would not necessarily impact our campuses across the district that greatly, but it would also very easily potentially fill those classes as well. If we're talking 30 students a semester, out of about 900 who are potentially eligible to be enrolled in some of those classes, I think we have great opportunity for that. To bring that programming to and provide an opportunity that we're not able to provide right now.
So what we're looking at is being able to offer classes that we can't.
Well,
at this time with the new space.
That is one of the benefits, absolutely. So what we do have is we have options out there. So when you talk about something like an AP programming thing, you're also talking about having educators who are prepared to be able to teach that.
Right.
So if we're talking about being fiscally responsible, the idea that we're hubbing that at one place versus training 30 teachers across our district, perhaps we only have to have 3 or 4 of them ready to go for that programming. And I think in this day and age too, we have to think differently. Is there opportunities for us to virtually work across our campuses? Is there the opportunity to have open studio space there where students could be traveling some days of the week, but maybe not all? And take advantage of technology to do things in a different way. We don't have to do things in the same way that we always have. That's part of the idea of having something that's innovated. And that's really one of the things that I think is potentially one of the best benefits of that. We talked about those soft skills a little bit. And you're talking about those things that employers want. They want that creativity. They want that collaboration. They want that communication. They want that critical thinking. Arts are places where those kinds of behaviors and mindsets are fostered. So if we're able to bring that to our students in a new way and hubbing it at a place, that's certainly something that we want. That has many, many benefits to doing something like this if we think a little bit differently about the way that we approach it.
Do you think... is it your considered opinion that the facility would be, all right, I listened to your presentation before, it was very good, it was exciting. Is it your considered opinion that the classes will be full within like 2 or 3 years?
I would absolutely agree that in the first 3 years, when any new program comes online, obviously you were going to have an implementation dip, or you were going to have some need to recruit. it's very difficult to recruit for programs that don't exist.
Right.
So until we create something that exists and until we create something that becomes a magnet for people to go to, there really is not going to be that demand. If we look at it just purely by the numbers, like I said, there's about 900 students across our district who are in that level of class who would be, able to be there. So I certainly think there is the potential to bring those numbers up, and also to recruit the right teachers and to train the right teachers to get them to be in the right space. So if you combine that idea of a unique space that's innovative, if you create that culture within a building and you have the right educators in there, you certainly are going to be able to recruit students to that. But it will take time. You are absolutely correct, Mrs. Doan.
Thank you. And I have a fiscal question, probably for Ms. Myers. I don't know, we're talking about renting out space in the evenings to the community, and what pot does that money go into?
President Cejar Martinez, members of the governing board, Mrs. Doan, when we have educational opportunities that are offered to our community and or students before or after school, it goes into a community education fund, which is Fund 520. And
I'm sorry, I missed that last sentence.
Fund 520. I'm being very technical now. It's Community Education Fund, and it's a cash-controlled fund, and basically revenues that are generated can be expended to support the program. And there were conversations this evening as well about facility rental. That's Fund 515, which is Civic Center. So those are our two statutorily controlled funds, and that's how we account for those types of activities. I will say whenever we do have a community education program, we do have a business plan, and we do ensure that it is solvent, that the revenues that are collected will cover the expenses.
That's all I have.
Okay. Ms. Myers, just to continue on that conversation before I start with my list, do we have any programs within our district that exist that could be a comparison to project any, to have any projections of what we could potentially create in revenue?
President Cejar Martinez, members of the governing board, when a community education opportunity is identified, as I mentioned, there's a business plan. I will look to some of our athletic offerings in Dr. Sievertson's area as an example. And so in that case, fees are identified as what would be charged, as well as what a staff member might be paid and any consumable supplies, et cetera. So when it comes to community education, be it art classes or guitar classes or other opportunities, you would have to look at the fee structure, the cost to have an instructor, supplies, et cetera. So again, until there's a defined program, it's difficult to do projections, but the example I'm providing is what we do in athletics.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Underhill.
Okay, so thank you. I had many of those same questions that I had emailed Mr. Croto earlier in the week, so I appreciate all the discussion around that. A couple of things I was hoping that you could maybe speak to are a little bit about, like Mr. Sandoval was talking about, looking forward to the future. Talk a little bit about the flexibility of the space if we were to utilize it for this model. If, in 10 years down the road, there's something that comes up that might be a little bit different. So if you could speak to a little bit about the flexibility of utilizing the space for this. And then also, we're in a very competitive environment. What could this type of facility or, this arts annex, or whatever we might call it, really bring to PUSD that would attract parents and students to our district?
Okay. President Cejar Martinez, Mrs. Underhill, I'll answer your second question, and I'll answer your first question. I'll let Mr. Panzer talk about the arts piece. The facility down in 10 years, if we get this facility up and running, obviously we have the flexibility to, as we do on any campus, to put different programs in different places. So we're not saying that the arts has to be there forever. We would transition it. The thing is, we would get the building up and running to code, utilize the spaces for the arts facility. In 10 years or sooner, if we deem that we need to have something else in there or we're going to utilize it in a different way, we would just have to obviously move back the arts, make sure there's a facility on Sunrise, and then use the space. What we gain there is the space is already operational. Right now, that building is not operational as it sits. So we gain that piece. We just have to make the changes necessary, as we do on a lot of our campuses right now as programs change.
Sure. So there's not a lot of like specific or unique equipment necessarily that has to be like plumbed or brought in. This would be kind of, I mean.
I'll let you speak to your art equipment.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Sehar Martinez and the members of the board. Certainly, to answer a couple of your questions, the spaces are all very flexible, and that is one of the advantages for those of you, and I know that you've all been in it. That Rotunda area is a 2,600 square feet space that has an incredible amount of flexibility to it. And the way that the rooms are all being designed have the potential to really have flexibility and to be repurposed. If you talk about having a digital photography lab there, well, that could easily be converted to any kind of a lab with computers in it. If you're talking about having a large classroom open studio space, well, that could turn into a maker space in the future. That could turn into many, many different things. Some of the unique things that you would have to have from an equipment standpoint, many of those things are portable where they could be moved from place to place. Things that would have to be built in would be the cabinetry and some additional sinks perhaps and different things like that. Moving the dark room over there would be one of the things that would be probably the most labor intensive to make a change. But there are certainly options with the direction of the board. We could certainly look at other options to move 90% of the programming and leave 10% on that campus to be fiscally responsible and minimize the expenses as much as possible to doing something like that, and also then to create a lot of capacity in the future to make changes. Large open spaces are very easy to transform, and I think that is one of the advantages when you're talking about repurposing from an arts facility space, is you would have very large open spaces that could transform into many, many different things into the future. In terms of the benefits, it's certainly we have arts programming on all of our campuses. That is something that the district truly and wholly believes in, is the whole child, to provide that K through 12 arts experience for our students and opportunities. But the things like the AP programming is something that we don't have. Expanding and creating new course offerings that enrich and go beyond what we have or give us potential to do that. Bringing additional staff. If you're talking about now potentially having increased enrollment on that campus, you're also going to have potentially increased staff that is going to be able to provide additional opportunities, not only within the arts, but also in some of the other areas within the campus as well. So it is certainly going to build something. I could certainly see between, like I said, the uniqueness of the space and the physical appearance of that building, some additions to the arts programming, recruiting the best staff in there, that we could create some kind of a program that is not available in any part of this. One of the options that we did bring forward was the idea that we could bring a recording studio and go down that path as well. Well, I am very confident now at this point in time there is not a facility like that currently operational in this part of the valley. So that could be something that we would be able to potentially, offer something that's very unique. So now not only do we have the visual arts in there, but we could start to integrate some of our performing arts pieces into there, and again have access to that from across the district for all of our students to come in there and utilize that space.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Sehar Martinez, can I join in, because this is a really exciting and good conversation, and what I would like to remind all of us is to continue to focus on the 4 strategic areas as we're doing, which you have done. And if we can look at it when we're looking at the student achievement, it's easy to find the thing. Yeah, there's certainly the AP and a variety of offerings that can be offered, and we know to Rob's point with respect to the arts, it is the way that we teach soft skills, and we do it in sciences also, but it's a real good venue for doing that. Community connections, again, this was a big area, and I know that we've made some already preliminary conversations with different people in the city. There is a very active interest in us using it, along with some of our communities, our retirement community, Westbrook Village. We should be able to offer opportunities for our community to go into a center up there and do it, or any other thing we're looking at. And the main one has to do with stewardship, and you're asking the absolute point questions, and note that my team is reasonably cagey. They do not want to put a number out there. We've been there, done that. That was not fun. But with respect to stewardship, what we heard our community say with the bond, very clearly, the other side was saying, you haven't used all the space you have. Do you really need it? We're trying to use every inch of space for our kids in a positive way and to be good stewards, because we're listening to our community and saying, you're wrong. Maybe not so much. If we can make 7 rooms, 5 rooms, 6 rooms, 7 rooms in a building, which you'll hear later, we do need space at Sunrise Mountain. We're getting tight there, tighter than we thought, I believe, originally, that we thought that we were getting. We need that space. We need it kind of now. I know I'm hearing 1.5 years. I'd like to see it in less than that amount of time. But the other component is taking a value add and putting something in there that has the potential of really saying to our community, we're listening with the space, we're offering the community a piece, and we had a very awkward situation. I'm going to use awkward. That's an awkward word for the situation. I could be more spicy than that, and turn it into something that is pretty positive. I see it as a hopeful, positive. And one of the key aspects, and this would be the same with Sybil, you had 2 leaders that can take an idea and turn it into something outstanding. So there was a tie score, definitely, for both of those programs right there. And the last thing is, we still will need a location for a Flex Academy, because they are not a program, they're a school. And so it's going to require us to balance program, school. They are one of our schools. So they do need their own space at some point. I just don't know that this is the right space at the right time for them. And we still have 1 year to accommodate probably what we're doing within that building, but they will need a space.
May I jump in? Hey, I just had one other question, and I think this would be for potentially Michelle, or Miss Myers, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that all the critical repairs are going to be done to our older southern schools, and we have funds for that before we put a ton of money into the Challenger Center.
Mrs. Zahar Martinez, members of the board, Mrs. Pingarelli, administration meets weekly to review needs that we have from a capital perspective, to prioritize our remaining bond funds and other capital eligible funds, and safety and the status of our buildings and student needs and site needs is of utmost importance. And that, as I said, is a priority, and as pricing might come in from a concept that would be approved this evening, and architectural renderings would help firm up what that cost might be. Those initial priorities that were discussed at the January 5th retreat would not be minimized or modified, because there's a district-wide focus on safety and ensuring we're doing what we can with scarce resources and the remaining dollars that we have within our bond program.
Thank you very much. And I do agree that the Peoria Flex Academy does need to have space to expand.
Any other comments? Okay, questions? Well, thank you. We have had a long conversation, and not just tonight, months, preparing for what's being presented this evening. And I appreciate, Mr. Panzer, all your work, the administration listening to the governing board's requests, as well as the community, and really taking into account the bottom line. We've heard and we've discussed over and over some important things to the board, which is cost. I really appreciate that even though we prioritize our students, we are also considering our community and what they gain from this building that they've literally purchased with their tax dollars as well. So moving forward, for me, all the opportunities or insights that we are facing moving forward, we look at how can we serve the most students. You've had a conversation tonight and heard that if we went just to a regular ed classroom, we would serve between 180 and 200, and Sunrise Mountain would still be left in a position where they're overcrowded. By transitioning this building to an arts facility, we can not only open it up to potential serving up to 900 students, we can now take some funds and coordinate extra classrooms at Sunrise Mountain to serve more students within that. So that will help alleviate some of the crowding up north. I consider revenue generating opportunities. We do have the ability to look more into that and look at fee structure, partnerships with the city. I recognize the need for Flex Academy having its own building, and I would encourage that you stay for the next part of the conversation when we look at our school sites down south, where we start to consider those other options. At this point, for me, what makes sense is forward thinking with an arts annex. We've had long conversation and numbers, and I hope that we've learned through this process that any number that is presented, it's publicly displayed, and so that the governing board consider the bare bones first before we invest large amounts. What I would like to add to the conversation, that I know we're focusing on the arts, but there's a special ed population that could benefit immensely from the arts curriculum. And I know personally that my son has visited Horizon Therapy to receive arts education and therapy. And our special ed community, which we have not touched yet, really could benefit from this type of education system. And I encourage our administration to look at how do we service not only our arts and AP students, but our special ed community, because they can definitely benefit from this type of education. Mr. Panzer, you look like you have something to add.
You, President Sehar Martinez, and members of the board. I certainly would love to make an addition to that. We do have potential, if you think about that space in there, we have unified programming that happens at the Liberty campus. We have unified arts programming that happens at the Kellis campus as well. They do offer unified theater on the Sunrise Mountain campus as well. So when you talk about having additional space and smaller spaces, that rotunda area with some very, modest kind of adjustments to have some temporary staging in there could be something that we could very easily bring unified programming in there. So it certainly does have that potential to grow and to have different needs met in the future for all of our students across the district in many, many different ways.
Perfect. With that in top of mind, we recently heard the governor's state of the address and funding sources. He is looking to address of giving more funds to Access. Access is an organization that service our needy students. I would consider seeing what services we can offer them and maybe tap in some of those revenue sources in the future. We definitely could capitalize on this opportunity for the arts program, especially our special needs students. Another thing is I would like to see the data as we move forward. If we as a board continue to proceed with the arts, is track the AP exams. If our students that are taking them now, what's their pass rate? And then seeing the after, if we move forward, how many students increase in the AP exam and how many do pass? And then the city revenue portion, how can we partner up and maybe offset some of those costs if there's joint partnership? We have covered everything, I believe, from class size to every cent and dollar on timeline. At this point, it has been presented to the governing board to give some direction on how we want to move forward. I do not have any more green slips or public requests from the to address this item, and I need a motion because this is an action item.
I move that we approve the district's recommendation to repurpose the Challenger Center to be used as an arts facility, pending certainly financials.
I second that. We have a motion by Mr. Sandoval and a second by myself to move forward with an arts facility. Motion passes unanimously, 5-0. Moving on, 8.3, Mr. Croto. Update and discussion on the Citizens Bond and Override Advisory Committee related to the need for a bond and override election.
President Seha Martinez, members of the board, Superintendent Palace Thompson. I am here tonight to follow up on the presentation that we had and the direction we received from the board at the last governing board meeting on a Citizens Bond and Override Advisory Committee. If you remember, we had policy BDF outlined 4 criteria that we needed to outline in order to move forward. So with the direction of that, one of the items that we need is the purpose of the committee. So the purpose of the Citizens Bond Committee and the Override Advisory Committee is to make a recommendation to the governing board regarding calling for a bond and or override election on Tuesday, November 5th, 2019. It is if the recommendation of the committee is that the Peoria Unified School District should go out for a bond and or override, the committee will also recommend amounts for a bond and or the percentages for an override to correspond with each respective recommendation. So that is the purpose of the committee. The committee demographics. As the direction we received, we called the original 13 members to see if they would like to continue serving on this bond committee. We had 10 of the 13 original members agree to remain on the committee. The breakdown of the committee with those 10, we have 5 males and 5 females, 5 parent community members and 5 employees. 6 reside south of Bell, 4 reside north of Bell. And currently we have 3 placements that will need direction from the board tonight on how to fill. I remind you that we do have a list that can be selected for people that have shown interest in being on that committee. It has grown since our last meeting. We now have 47 people with the 10, or actually the 13 original are included in that 47, so we're up to 47. So I'm going to be asking during the questions. I'll move through the rest, then we'll have some discussions on how we replace the 3 members and hopefully have direction from the governing board on that tonight. Our proposed meeting dates, another bullet point that we needed to cover per our policy. We are recommending that the committee meets on the following dates: February 5th, 12th, March 5th and 26th, April 2nd and 16th, and May 9th. All meetings will be from 4 to 6 at the DAC. We've had some discussion on increasing that maybe to 5 to 7. So we're up for that. Meeting dates and times may subject to change depending on the needs of the committee. So if the committee feels we need some more time or less time, obviously we can adjust those dates. But those are the proposed meeting dates that we have. Reporting dates. The governing board will receive committee updates via written reports from the administration following each committee meeting. In addition, public meeting minutes that will be posted on the district's website. We have one of the bullet points is to the facilities and the supplies, equipment is clerical support. We have a clerical person. Ms. Myers, the secretary, will be taking our minutes and posting those and aiding that committee. The governing board will receive the final report and recommendation on May 9th, 2019 at the regular governing board meeting. That is our goal for the timelines, if you remember, that we talked about in the last meeting of getting the election and letting the county know we're going for the election. So May 9th is a critical date with that. At that point, the committee will be terminated, their job will be done, and we will move on from there. That is kind of the brief covering those 4 bullets. I would stand for directions or any questions on the placements and how you'd like to proceed with the 3 placements. I will add that 2 of the members, original members, not coming back were governing board member Mrs. Doan's picks, and 1 was our ex-governing board member, Mrs. Connect's picked. So that's where they came from. So I will stand and answer any questions or stand for direction from the governing board.
Mr. Croto, we appreciate the presentation. I think it's a great start that we start with slide committee demographics and have the conversation as a board, how we want to move forward. So we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Sandoval.
Sure. Yeah, I think, when we take a look at our committee, certainly we want to make sure they represent, all stakeholders within the district without question. And, we've got a pool of 40-plus individuals that have thrown their name in the hat to choose from. Is that correct?
President Sejar Martinez, Mr. Sandoval, that's correct. 47 are on the list currently. That includes the original 13. So
Yeah.
you have about 34 on that list
Sure.
to choose from for the replacements.
Yeah, and I think, as we take a look at it, and I mean, I believe, we were mindful as a board last time around to make sure that there was well representation, across the district, across all verticals, to ensure that, we were realizing the lenses, from globally, right, throughout PUSD. I don't know that, industry-wide, I mean, arts, if we need to take a look at, were there some industries that we didn't consider, et cetera, maybe from the city? That would be one way to look at it, right? Is understanding that criteria, how the committee is really kind of made up, and what our, potential, not really policy, but, what our wish would be there. But, I think we've done a good job, of, again, bringing in individuals that represent the district as a whole. So, I mean, I know Ms. Underhill is new to the board, and, we have the liberty of, looking at the list and making our selections. I mean, and this would certainly be up to you, Ms. Underhill, but, I certainly think that, she has, should be given the liberty to make her own, selections as well. Even though I think we have one of Ms. Connects that has agreed to stay on the committee. So, but again, I'll leave that up to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. Ms. Doan?
Well, I don't think I really have a lot to say about it. We just need to get our picks in, and I guess I need to look at the list, and we need to get going on it. That's,
Thank you. Ms. Pengarelli?
Well, I was happy that my two decided to come back, so I'm really happy about that. Yeah, when I had picked two people that are, my criteria was somebody who could analyze data, because there was going to be a lot of it thrown at them, and most importantly, it's somebody I could trust. That was my big item. So for Mrs. Doan's, if we go that way, Mrs. Doan's picks, Ms. Underhill, I'm sure they'll pick wisely on somebody that they can trust.
Ms. Underhill?
Yeah, so I guess I've been thinking about this, and I recognize the need that we need to move forwardly, to get this piece going. And so however we decide to do that, I understand. But one thing I did notice is that in looking kind of for something to guide my understanding of how we have selected advisory committee members in the past, and also how we've kind of created guidelines for the composition of the committee, I didn't really see anything. And I understand you have your own criteria, and I'm hearing that. But it would be my suggestion, and we're not at the beginning of the process, but if we were to kind of outline what sort of that composition of the committee might be. So that might be more of a future agenda item. But that said, I think from my standpoint, I don't really care whose picks they are, but I think as a board, we need to look at what we have and the folks that have agreed to participate, because it's a big commitment, and just really make sure that we do feel like we have a well-rounded perspective from our stakeholders. And I think what David said about industry is important. I think potentially having some representatives from our retirement communities would be important. And just making sure we have, high school parents, elementary parents. So just, I don't know all of the people on the committee. I don't know their backgrounds. And frankly, like I said, I don't need to make personal picks. I just want to make sure that our stakeholder group really represents and they're all willing, but we want to make sure we have that variety of perspectives. So I'm sorry I'm not really giving you a super straightforward direction, but that is my wish, that we can just look at that as a board and make sure we're comfortable with it.
Well, I appreciate sharing your insight, and just to give you a little bit more background, when we started this original bond committee, at that time, you are correct, the policy doesn't give a direct indication, but it does state that at every bond committee that is created, it's at the will of the board as we talk through that. And we did talk through that process, and then the last time we determined it was a majority, but was definitely, we can add that to a future agenda item if you want to discuss structure moving forward. So at the end of this board meeting, we'll put in future agenda items. For me, and this thought process, and again, thank you for taking the time to reach out to every committee member. It is very time consuming. You guys spent over 7 months last time going through the nuts and bolts of the needs of the district. So highlighting, I know last board meeting you said, what's the purpose? It's there. Was that information communicated to every committee member?
I believe it was, and it will be reiterated again on that first meeting on February 5th, I believe that meeting date was, on February 5th, along with some of the housekeeping items. We have to go over open meeting law and all that, and we will definitely go over the purpose of the committee with all the members that are there.
Excellent.
President Martinez.
Mr. Sandoval.
So as we, and thank you for bringing that up. I mean, as we take a look at the scope of work or purpose of the committee, that first paragraph, talks about how they'll provide a recommendation on whether or not it makes sense to go out for a bond. And those are my words, right? But I think, if that recommendation is based on the needs of the district, and this may help expedite this process as well, I think the need is there. We've the last couple years, we've had a committee, they've gone out, they've assessed the needs of the district, its growth, et cetera, all considerations, right, safety. I don't know, unless there are other considerations, variables that the district, would like to take a look at would like to charge this committee with, that would, help them understand whether or not we should go out for a bond in 2019. And this is a question. Or is this first paragraph saying, does it make sense to go out for the bond and override on the same election day, or should we split them? Is that kind of what we're looking for based on that first paragraph? Because again, for me, the need's there.
Mm-hmm. President Sehar Martinez, Mr. Sandoval, the answer to your question is yes. One of the jobs of this committee will be decide if we need to go out for a bond and if we need to go out for an override. They are separate issues. They will discuss whether they think they need to go at the same time, or do we hold off on the override this year and go for a bond, or do we hold off on the bond and go for an override? So that is going to be a big part of the committee, is to understand the difference between a bond and an override, the needs we have, and should we go out together, separately, what do they think? That is going to be a discussion that's going to occur very soon in that committee. Additionally, if they feel we need to go out for either the bond or the override, by law, we have to come up with amounts, and those have to be specified in our election pamphlets. So that's a percentage for an override, and that's a bond amount for the bond. So that is another piece that those committees will have to decide. And so they have multiple things to do in a very short time to understand this. The good news is we have 10 people right now that have been doing it for 7 months already, so they have a great understanding of the process, and that'll help speed us along. We're going to pick some 3 new ones. We certainly will help them along and spend as much time as we need to get them caught up, but they will have 10 members around them that can also help them. So we feel like it's going to be an easier process. It's not a simple process by any means, and we're doing 2 legs on this one. We're doing a bond and an override. So and they're very different animals, and we need to explain that to them so that they fully understand.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think it is important that we establish clarity without question on what's at stake here, right, and the difference between the 2 funding sources. That said, as we take a look at defining the budget, I do recommend, that the committee does, allow third-party participation, if that's even allowed, meaning industries, architecture, construction, et cetera, to help define that budget. I mean, because I think there may be some considerations that outside of the needs that are right in front of us, considerations around inflation and supplies and products, on the construction side, how those may increase year over year. Because we, if, a new school is in there, we may not, build a new school for, another year or two. And there are those factors, those variables involved. So what I would hate to see is if we come up with a dollar amount and then when it comes time to build, we didn't, allocate enough funds.
President Sayar Martinez, Mr. Sandoval, those are discussions. I was in on the last part of this committee. The last time it was there, I came for the last 3 meetings, I believe. And those are discussions that we will definitely have. I know they use outside resources. The committee asks for outside resources in forms of quotes or construction or what do we think this may cost. They're constantly seeking that information and the administration is providing that information. So that is something that's an ongoing process with that committee. I know they do talk about that a lot. It's very in-depth group. As far as participation, that committee is run like a governing board meeting. So anybody can come and speak. We do have, they fill out the same green slip that they use here, and we allow for them to address the committee and do that. So it is open. They are open meetings, and we welcome people to come. Last time we had a good amount of people come and watch the meetings that I attended. So definitely will be a good process.
All right, continuing with the committee makeup. So based on the previous conversation that the board had, we agreed by majority of 13, original 13. And what has been presented is that we have equity in regards to or balance between male to female, demographics between north and south, community and parent involvement. I know that we're big on inclusion and feedback. Some of the points that Mr. Sandoval brought up is the community does have access to the meetings and they can participate at any given time. They can even send emails to the district. And we encourage that. It may be something to consider that if you want industry leaders, that they have an off-site meeting and then ultimately present to the 13. With that, I'm going to state that we continue with the 13, have Ms. Doan add from her 2 picks based on the interests of the community, and Ms. Underhill replace the 1. And the why for Ms. Underhill replacing the 1 is I think about the process of the land deal. We wouldn't start the process all over because we have a new board member. We continue where we left off and move forward. And so with that train of thought, I would use that methodology in this process. We wouldn't start this process all over. You would continue off where the previous board member had her 2, and then you now it's need to replace 1. So I'm going to make that recommendation to my fellow governing board members. Ms. Underhill pick 1 to replace. Ms. Doan pick the 2. Ms. Underhill.
I understand what you're saying from that standpoint, and I do want to make sure that we get this going quickly. I guess my thought is that since we're trying to replace 3, and I'm not familiar with all the folks on the list, if we could take a couple days, I'd be very happy to meet with Ms. Doan to review, so we can review the folks in the queue, right, that are in the application process, so that together we could, kind of come to that decision, because it would be helpful for me, 1, but 2, I think it would make sure that, as a board, we feel like we've got a good, good set, and then in the future, we can figure out if we need to figure out kind of composition prior to getting started, so.
Well, I will share, you will have the leg up, because and when we had the process, so Ms. Airy took the time and initiative to black out all the information so that way, for privacy reasons for those interest committees, so we blindsided pick committee 2. This time, who we are. Right. Who the members, and so you can have an opportunity to go through that pile. Now, I did talk to Ms. Linda Pellis-Thompson, our superintendent, that if the board were to proceed and give you to the opportunity that we give you guys and respect your time to have a thoughtful process. So I was thinking by close of business Monday, so they have the weekend to process Friday, Monday, Tuesday. But if you were thinking on a different timeline, or you need more time, I think that is an accommodation we can make.
President Sayar Martinez, if Monday's doable, that would be excellent, because remember, I have to let this committee know that our first meeting's February 5th. We have not done that because I brought it to you first before I start making plans with this committee in case our direction was different. So if we can do that, I would like to extend the courtesy to those members, to the 13 members, that we have a meeting on February 5th and give them some time to plan if they need to.
And post publicly. Ms. Pingerelli?
No, I just had a suggestion that, when we first picked our two, we had an idea of, kind of the type of person we were looking for. I picked a teacher and a CPA. So if the type of person that you're looking for is not on that list, I think that the list should still be open up until, so Mrs. Underhill or Ms. Doan can pick who they're comfortable with.
That's a great point. So if there is somebody that's in the criteria, let me make sure I understand.
Yes.
In the criteria of interests, if there's somebody that doesn't represent a representation, you feel free to reach out to them and say, are you interested? We don't have any business leaders. If you are interested, complete the application, and then I would consider you for sitting on the committee.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense to me. I just want to have the time to, I don't even know, I know we have 13 members. I know their names. I've seen their names. I don't know their backgrounds. You know what I mean? So for me, just today, make sure we have a wide lens and a wide perspective, that extra time would be helpful, and I swear we'll get them done by Monday.
And you could see the applicants that we have chosen, they have access to them as well.
Be great.
And real quick, I just want to mention, I think this, as we select these committees, there is a line item in there that provides the district with the liberty to increase the number of committee members as they see fit to put the district in the most advantageous position, right? So, whether they want to exercise that or not, that'll be up to them, but I want to make sure that, that is clear, that, based on past committees or, again, as we take a look at maybe some opportunities that we may have to ensure the success of the bond, at the will of the district, I just want to make sure it's understood that you do have that liberty.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'm glad you mentioned that.
And I will respect your insights, but the feedback that we got from our past CFO was to work well in this tight time frame, we need to have a controlled group. And the original 13 that was presented by our previous CFO, I would like to continue, but give the administration, if you wanted to create subcommittees to do that extra research, to focus on other voices, and then ultimately present to the 13 to make the final vote.
Well, I would like to, I'm sorry, if I could
Ms. Underhill?
Yeah, if I could just ask Ms. Linda Pellis-Thompson, what are your thoughts on that? If you kind of get our collective roster together and you're like, oh, we're still missing this, I guess.
Well, no one asked me if I wanted to pick. I'm just saying, I didn't get asked to pick anybody. I know that as we're adding to the group, for example, it was pointed out, I don't know that we have a Glendale resident. I think that's significant when we don't ask for all of the racial and background. It's not legal to do, but it's nice if we had that. If I had my choice and I was picking, I would love to pick people I didn't even know at all, that represent that have not been serving a lot on this, because there's a broad base. So it would be nice if there were people on this committee that weren't involved in a whole lot of things, and just no one knows this person. That would be great. There is no firm policy, or we've had protocol and procedure. I don't know that we've had firm policy to how we want to do it, and I believe we need to do that and create, how do we want to do committees, what do we want to do? I think it's a good idea, Mrs. Ask Martinez, to have some adjunct committees that might be needing to go and research certain pieces so that the committee at large can get that I think works. What I'm hearing, though, is you want to go outside of the list, and I have a list here. That's you have the ability to do that. I don't know if that sends a message to the people on the list that I was waiting and anxious and wanted to be on. There's nothing that limits 13. There's also nothing that doesn't say that you couldn't stop and say, you know what, we have these 10 people. They know this stuff. They've worked. Why don't we just go ahead with them? That's a whole other way to do it, too. You can do that. So to your answer, there is, I don't believe, I could be corrected, any policy. It's just that we need direction on, did you want to stay within the 44? Did you want to move on? Did you want to put them all on? I think we have, my sake is we have enough employees. I think we're top-heavy with our employees now. We can stop with that and now make sure we have non-employee related people on the community, I think, from the community. So you can go with 10, you can stop, you can add 13, you can go with 34 if you want. He can manage a group, he knows how to do that. And it's a big decision.
So apparently I misspoke, sorry, not policy, but it's in procedure, that line item. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that's all.
I want to highlight the interest form because it was a board discussion, and the original reason why it was brought up is because a lot of community members have said, I didn't know, or nobody called me. And so the idea of an interest form was not to interview you or saying you're better than somebody or to do it that way. It was just to have a running record that if anybody at any point showed interest, they can let the district know. And if somebody did not know that we were going to create a bond committee and at what point they were interested and you spoke to them, I would encourage them that they complete the interest form and then you can then choose them from there. It is so that, and this is a model, I went to a city council meeting at the city of Peoria, and they have interest forms. And so between Danielle's expertise, Miss Aries' expertise, and the city of Peoria's, we've modeled what they've practiced, and that's why the interest forms are there. But in regards to the 13, I'm comfortable with moving forward because we are on a timeline, a tight timeline, and I encourage that if you do want subcommittees, that it ultimately present to the 13. And Ms. Pellis-Thompson, you brought a good point. You did not get to pick. I would give you, from my personal opinion, I would be comfortable if you wanted to off-board the 3 from the previous superintendent and pick 3 new ones, 1 classified, 1 certified, and 1 administrator. That is a decision you should make with you and your team, or how you want to move forward. But the 13 is still where I stand, and have Ms. Underhill and Ms. Doan replace those picks. Ms. Doan?
I wouldn't mind if Ms. Thompson wanted to make a pick of her neighbor or somebody. I don't think it has to be an employee, but I think that Ms. Thompson should, perhaps you could take a pick, and I could take a pick, and Ms. Underhill could take a pick.
Oh.
What do you think?
I like that.
And just whoever.
Okay.
You know, I don't think it needs to be an employee necessarily.
Sounds good.
So if, with Ms. Doan's recommendation, she is offering so that we can stick to the 13, it's manageable and something to work with in our tight time frame. Ms. Doan, you would choose 1, Ms. Pellis-Thompson of your choice, and then Ms. Underhill. Governing Board, is there any additional comments on that information?
Is it still Ms. Thompson has 1 pick, but then can she still rotate the other 3? If that our past superintendent.
Well, let's ask her.
Okay, that's up to the board what they are comfortable with, but I know, I don't know what you prefer.
Are you?
I was kind of just kidding about needing a pick. You know, I'm comfortable with you doing that. What we do need is I don't think there's a need to take off of any of the staff that Dr. Stifler put on. That's not necessary. They're committed, although there is one that just moved into a different position that might say, hey, you know, take it, it's fine. We need more parents. Okay. That's really what's needed. So, you know, my pick, if you were giving me a pick, it would be a parent, no question about it, or community member. Parent, by that I mean parent, community member. If somebody's really stuck on somebody and somebody else, an example, I would look at the demographics a little bit and say, we don't have Glendale, you know. Well, I don't like Glendale, I don't either. Well, I can find one that I don't even know and make sure that we're represented from some of the schools.
Okay.
But I think between the three, we should be able to work collaboratively and pick three that everybody's comfortable with.
Absolutely.
By Monday?
By Monday.
Are we staying with the list? Is that what we
Yeah.
said or no?
Yeah.
Yes?
Well, you look like you have a thought.
No, I appreciate the inclusion. But no, I'll say this. Look, I just wanted to mention that line item in the procedure. You know, I don't think as a board, you know, we should hold the district, I don't want to say the word hostage, but, you know, not allow them to exercise that language that we have in the procedure. I think, you know, yeah, 13 is a you know, probably a good number, an odd number, which is good. But again, you know, based on, you know, prior experiences, the committees, you know, if you wake up tomorrow morning, Ms. Pallas Thompson and district leadership, and have a thought, you know, where we may need to add a couple, you know, I think you have that liberty to do so. You know, when we talk about the definition of insanity, right? Do the same thing over and over again, and open, we get a different result. So I just, you know, want to make sure that that's understood. That's all. Thanks.
So to be clear,
Would you like me to?
please.
President Cesar Martinez, members of the board, here's my direction that I hear. So please correct me if I'm not walking away with the right information. We are going to replace 13. The pick is Mrs. Underhill is going to pick one, Ms. Doan's going to pick one, and Mrs. Pallas Thompson's going to pick one. We're going to pick off the list, but if the list is not comprehensive enough, we can open it back up, and the picks will be completed by Monday. We'll provide you with the list. Mrs. Airy will provide you with the list and all that you need, and we'll have that completed. That's what I'm taking away.
Excellent. Is that what we understand, board? There's one more thing I need to add. And this is, the board has agreed that there's an absentee vote. That if we were ever in a situation and one of us were absent, we could call in a vote or ask for the item to be brought back to vote. I believe that to value and to acknowledge the time of all committee members, that if they are absent on a voting day, that they be given the opportunity for the same procedures that we follow, that they be given an opportunity to call in their absentee vote. I would like to see 13 members vote.
And President Cesar Martinez, remember, we have to follow the same rules that you follow as a governing board. So to go back, I don't think that's allowed after the meeting is complete, but you are correct in that you can phone in and be represented during the meeting. That is a right that you have, and that committee has to operate the same way with the same rules. Stress that.
Perfect. I would appreciate that, that everybody has an opportunity to vote. With that, any other discussion? So do we need a vote on this?
Yes.
I move that we follow the recommendation as presented by Mr. Croto.
Recent recommendations.
Yeah.
Do you have it? Would you like to read that back?
The recommendation.
Motion to approve the purpose and the
By Monday.
By Monday.
Yeah, does my,
A good idea, yeah. Very good.
No.
Fully. That was his recommendation.
Monday the 28th, right?
Say which Monday.
We're just making sure the verbiage is correct. And we need a second.
I second.
Ms. Underhill will second.
You guys. List for them.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
The work begins again.
Again. And the good news is, Mr. Savoy is now up.
All right. 8.4, discussion and consideration of school enrollment and capacity for school year 2019-2020. Mr. Savoy.
Members of the board, Mrs. Thompson, I was going to say to Mr. Croto, he's a tough act to follow. For having us this evening. As you may recall, we have a revised new policy, JFB, talking about open enrollment. And for the first time, we are bringing our recommendation to the governing board as it is prescribed in policy for your approval on our recommendations of where we do not have capacity available to accept additional open enrollment students. So this has to be done by the first Friday in February, and so we're here tonight for this discussion. What I've provided for you is a table of all of our elementary schools. I've had several conversations over the last couple of days with several members of the board, and I do just want to point out that Copperwood, the number 800 for capacity is incorrect. It's actually 1080. We missed some portables and a couple of classrooms, and so I need to make sure that we have that number updated and then adjusted, which would reflect then they have space available. So on this chart, what you see is the build design of the school and our projected enrollment for next year. These projections have been given to the principals, and this is what we're staffing our schools for next year. On the next slide, we have high school, which shows projected enrollments, and then the high school capacity of 2,100. That number represents an opportunity for us to provide very rigorous academic choices for students, as well as a well-rounded elective program. Some schools, when you actually look at the build design, can accommodate more than 2,100, but we use that number because it's kind of a number that supports students and choices. And you can see the projected enrollments. These are the numbers that our high school principals are working with as they build their high school schedules right now for next year, and the allocation that we've provided them for teachers. Based on the data from both of those slides, administration is bringing a recommendation to the board to consider that we would communicate that we would no longer accept open enrollments either in district or out of district at Vistancia Elementary and Sunset Heights Elementary. Just a note for the board, that is the current status of Sunset Heights Elementary right now, and it has been for the last 2 years based on boundary adjustments that occurred in 2016. Now, having said that, the next main bullet, site capacity decisions, just want to share with the board that although we're not recommending additional schools be closed to open enrollment, administratively, we believe there's value in having people choose our district if they so desire for the many opportunities that we provide our kids, whether it be in the arts, academically, or athletically. But I've also, administration has heard the board's call to focus on having class sizes smaller. And so what I want to share with the board on this bullet here is that we have directed up till this year our schools that if a family approached and was applying for open enrollment, the max, we have a max, and once you hit that max, then you add another teacher. Well, the max in 4th through 8th grade is 35 students. In 2nd and 3rd grade, it's 30. And in 2nd grade, it's 28. First grade, 28. The reason why I mention that is we would have schools that would have 32, 33, 34 students in their class, and if a principal called us, we'd say, yes, take the open enrollment. We want to fill every seat. Of course, that leads to higher class size, and you can imagine the teacher when the principal says, we have this new open enrollment, you join your class today. So hearing the board's call, the work that we did with the open enrollment policy, we have directed our principals that they now should recognize capacity at their school at the standard number. So in 4th through 8th grade, the standard number is 30, and I have that for you in the parentheses. Kindergarten, it's 20, 1st grade, it's 24, and 2nd and 3rd grade, it's 26. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if the board agrees with this, that our principals, once a class size hits that number, if a student who moves into the neighborhood comes to the school, we accept them. But if it's a person who is choosing to come on open enrollment, the principal will have the discretion whether or not to accept that student. And what most instances would happen if it was a very first time family coming and they were at capacity of 30, I suspect that most principals would probably not take that open enrollment to keep the class size lower. Why it's important that the principal has that flexibility is it's very possible that a family could have a student in the 2nd or 3rd grade, and then a sibling wanted to join that student maybe at the 1st grade, and they're at the standard number of 24, but if the principal wanted to add one more student being at 25 because it was an older sibling, which aligns with our policy, but that's a decision they would have to make. And then my last comment is on high school, and the one that we talk about mostly is some of our high schools that are larger, but we use a formula, and I will give an example. Liberty High School, in 2016, we recognized then that we were potentially going to be too big for the school size as we looked down the road. And not to close open enrollment at Liberty, but what we did is we took what we call the magic number, which is 2340, and how did we arrive at that number? We worked with our parents and teachers and community members that were on the committee, and we said if we took all the classrooms on this campus, multiplied it by 30, you would end up with the number 2340. So high school is a little bit different beast because on a high school campus, a teacher teaches typically 3 periods, and if she has no students on the 4th period, whether it's in the 2nd hour or the 3rd hour or the 5th hour, she could stay or he could stay in their classroom and do work or prepare, do lesson planning for the next day. When we talk about that number 2340, what happens in that situation is every classroom is used every period. So if I'm the teacher who's now having my preparatory period, I would have to leave that room because another teacher would come in to teach classes. So what I mean by that is we're able to take up to that number of students and maximize our space fully. And Liberty's done a good job of that. What they do is they monitor their sophomore, junior, and senior class. You know what those numbers are pretty much. And then you have to make a decision at the freshman level, if you take students or not. And you manage that number based on the other 3 classes to stay below that number. So that's a lot of information at once, but I thought I'd give you the information and then stand for any questions that the board would have.
Mr. Savoy.
You're welcome.
And you are correct. We have had lengthy discussions about this presentation, so I appreciate that extra time. We'll go ahead and start with Ms. Underhill.
So if we're working with these new standards for class size, is our cutoff then for adding another section based on these, or will it be added, is it still on the higher number?
Madam President, Mrs. Underhill, good question. To split for a new class would still be on the max number.
Okay.
Yep, good question.
And I believe we've reviewed a policy that if we go over by one and we don't have the capacity to split for a new class, our policy says to hire an instructional assistant, an aide.
Madam President, members of the board, that's correct. And that happens as the year goes on, too. Sometimes we recognize it may not be the best thing to split up a class once students have made friends, they've made a connection with their teacher, and even teachers, not in all cases, but most cases would say, let's keep the class together. What additional support can you provide us?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Pangarelli?
I know we spoke yesterday. Thank you very much for your input.
Yes,
Vistancia, the projected enrollment, I know we had spoke, the 1165, that wasn't the most up-to-date? I thought it was well over.
Vistancia Elementary?
Yes.
So the projected enrollment is 1165. That's correct. That's what we're staffing the school at.
Okay.
Just, Madam President, members of the board, just to point out, their enrollment today is 1214. I pulled numbers that are present today. Their capacity sits at 1215. So they're under that number, but they don't have a lot of room. The other part of the recommendation for Vistancia and Sunset Heights not to continue to accept open enrollment is we recognize, particularly Sunset Heights, you look across the street, there's a lot of development going on Parcel 7 and Parcel 8, and those children are zoned for Sunset Heights. So we know they're going to come. And it's not best to start people on open enrollment and then have to say you no longer can attend here. So we're planning for that growth. And the same thing with Vistancia. The boundary change in 2016, we took a lot of the students from the Tierra del Rio and the Northlands area and moved them to Vistancia. Both of those areas are still being developed. So we need to be sure that we have space for those students to go to Vistancia.
In terms of Liberty, well, thank you. We're at 2304. If you look at 30 students per class, I thought that was 2340. At the upper end, it's, I guess, what is the, is it 2,700 is the total max if you take 34 students, 34.5 students.
Madam President, Ms. Pangarelli, I don't have my calculator in front of me, but you're right. If you multiplied it by 34.5 or 35, that number does go up. The space is there, yes.
So their capacity isn't the 21. Is that set by fire marshal? Is it set, I guess, what is that kind of upper limit set by?
Madam President, members of the board, the 2100 is really selected on the idea of what is a sound number where you have the most flexibility to offer the academic rigor that you want to offer and choices for students. Sometimes when you get way too below that number, you're challenged by you don't have enough students, enough sections to offer all that you want. And if you get too high above that number, you run into the same situation. So that number was picked on that reason. If you look at the design build, which is take the number of classrooms, multiply it by 30, you come out with the 2340. So that's the difference.
But how do you come up with the max, the 34.5?
That number.
Yeah, how do you, I mean, is that something, because I know, I'm at Grand Canyon and in our labs, you've got 24 students in the lab, and that's all they can take. That's the max. So I didn't know how is it the fire marshal, or how do you come up with that maximum number of students per class?
Madam President, Ms. Pangarelli, I understand your question, and thank you for asking that. It really is part of the budgeting process, really. I mean, we could pick a number that's lower than 34.5. And so we use that number to calculate the number of sections that you're allowed, which tells you how many teachers that you would hire. And so the smaller that number gets, the more budget impact that has by the more teachers that you need. Now, on a high school, we know that not every class has 34.5 or 35 students. In fact, some classes will have much less than that, and there are classes that are over that too. I mean, we monitor that because there'll be some mathematics classes or English classes that may be 37, 38 students in the class. Principals make those decisions, trying to offer everything that students request, because what happens in the scheduling process is students submit the class interests that they have that they want to take, and then the administration has, and guidance, has to build out that schedule to meet those requests from the students. But the 34.5 really is just a factor that we use to determine the number of sections, which determines the number of teachers, and then what is that budget impact.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Sandoval.
Thank you. Mr. Savoy, thank you, sir. Yes, we've had, conversations about class size and the importance of that and allowing our teachers to, have a connection, with their students to be able to look beyond what's right in front of them sometimes, right? When we take a look at these numbers and the minimums or maximums, we also understand that every site has a story, and I've said that many times. So when we take a look at our schools that have other dynamics, like maybe a Sun Valley or schools, or have a larger number of students with special needs, et cetera. Are we also adjusting those numbers, for those sites as well? In light of the fact that there are more needs at some of those sites versus some of our other sites? Or do we feel that, or do we feel that the numbers that, because we went from max capacity to kind of defining our own kind of threshold, if you will, do we feel that those thresholds are appropriate, for those schools that have more dynamics than others?
Madam President, Mr. Sandoval, one of the things I just want to remind the board, this presentation this evening is really just about determining open enrollment. In other words, do we have space in our district to accept students on two ways? One, they can move around within our district, or secondly, students from outside the district that want to come into the Peoria Unified School District. So we're just trying to determine, is there room in the school for us to accept additional students? The question that you're asking is really more about class size and allocation of how we staff our students. I will tell you that this year we went straight across the board. So we use the same factor at every school to determine our allocation of homerooms at each school. That's elementary. And then the same is true at high school.
So maybe this is another discussion, and thank you for correcting me. I was just going off that line item that reads site capacity based on class size. But I would definitely want to, and I don't think it needs to be a study session, but I think we need to certainly understand and have conversations with those sites to make sure that, we're considering those other variables and factors to make sure that we're putting every student every day in a position to be successful.
Madam President, Mr. Sandoval, we believe that in alignment with the second bullet, that will support what you're after by not necessarily taking students that would get us up close to the max of 35. So if we have classrooms currently that are at, 30 or 28, the principal would have that discretion not to accept additional open enrollment. It doesn't answer your question if the student lives there in the neighborhood. That's a different thing. But we won't unnecessarily load classes on students who are seeking open enrollment. So I think it will help in some instances.
Ms. Stone.
Oh, I appreciate your work and bringing this to us. I think we've about talked this thing to death. We've got all the numbers, we've got all the projections and everything going on. I think the information's good, and no doubt we'll need updates as time goes by, but I appreciate your work, and thank you.
President Martinez, sorry.
Mr.
One last
Sandoval.
thing. Thank you. Mr. Savoy, you said something earlier that I absolutely agree with. When we take a look at these numbers and the fact that, we certainly have growth and are sought out as a district, from students that are even either living outside of the boundaries of a site or outside of our district as a whole. So I would agree with you 100%. I mean, we're in the business of developing our future and our youth. And, as we take a look at these numbers and as we continue to adapt and accommodate those numbers, consideration in how we also grow and adapt our capacity, as a district. And these are very helpful to understanding how we do that. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. We don't want to jeopardize the education environment while we add more open enrollment. We had that conversation today, Mr. Savoy, so thank you. This was really eye-opening as we went through this conversation and took a look at the calculation, recognizing that we are using 2100 as a guidepost, but is not truly an indicator that we're over capacity on some of our school sites. Point taken with Liberty High School, we discussed 78 classrooms, 30 bodies in a classroom, but we have a policy here, or IIB, that recommends 35. So it's safe to say that though we're calculating 30, we have a policy that states 35, and if we have more room to add students. And if we did the calculation of 34.5 times 78, it's 2,700. And at Liberty High School, we are not over capacity. So I just want to clarify that we are not over capacity in Liberty High School. I appreciate the extra email and documentation that we received today. At Liberty High School, we've only have, it looks like a difference of 232 students out of district and variances. And if their capacity is at 2,300, there's still room to add more students. And I want to communicate that to the community, that we are not over capacity at Liberty High School, and we have the will to do that. But to Mr. Sandoval's point is we also don't want to jeopardize the learning environment, because we have our priorities is to create the best academic situation. And to Ms. Pengarelli's point, safety is a priority. I know some feedback that I've heard from our science teachers, our labs do have regulation sizes, and it cannot exceed 35, and I would be concerned if they were over 35. Switching back to your recommendation, I am going to support that we do not continue any more open enrollments for Vistancia and Sunset Heights. I do want to highlight our elementary schools. It was eye-opening that some of our schools are at very low capacity, and when we move forward looking at utilization of space, and we have Peoria Traditional School and we have Flex Academy School that are actual schools, we need to consider repurposing our southern schools, and that's what it looks like. I would encourage that conversation to be had, that we could follow the law, we follow timeframes, that we have to have this conversation, and if we do go down that path, we communicate that. The last thing is my ask. So in policy IIB-R, it focuses on class size, and it identifies the standard and the max. My ask is that we give written communication to, you've already spoken to our administrators, but our teachers and staff, that this is the standard or which we are going to move forward with, and we have a policy to support that. In addition, if they were to exceed the maximum by one, we have a policy that supports that they receive support. I know that is something the Budget Committee is going to have to consider because that's support, from my understanding, that we have not received in my years of service if we exceeded that number. And I would like written communication, and then I know that all communication to the staff does come to the board. So I look forward to seeing that. Okay. Other than that, I accept your recommendation. Ms. Hill.
President Ceja Martinez, I just wanted to state that I know that there's a difference between, our upper limit and what we were basing the 2,100 on being 30 per classroom, and then the maximum because of our allocation piece. I think before we talk about whether a school is overcrowded or not overcrowded, we need to also talk about what is best practice and what is best for students. So I guess I just want to make sure that we're reiterating the fact, and wherever that best practice might come from would be helpful in kind of documenting what we're stating about our capacity in our schools. So I just want to make sure we're not touting that, we're not, in fact, at all overcrowded, because we have two different things that we're utilizing to
Motion to accept the recommendation on open enrollment variances.
Really?
Oh, it's,
That's not a voting.
oh, okay, we're good. All right, thank you very much, Mr.
Okay,
Savoy. All right, 8.5, report and discussion on local and state and federal legislative issues and activities. It is that time of the year. Ms. Myers.
Good evening again, President Ceja Martinez, members of the Governing Board, Superintendent Palace Thompson. And I was going to acknowledge we did have Councilman John Edwards with us this evening from the city of Peoria. We appreciate that he joined our meeting, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide an information report on local, state, and federal issues and activities. And yes, it is the season. In fact, the first regular session of the 54th legislature started earlier this month on January 14th, which coincidentally was the first date that our budget team met, and we'll have an update on our budget team with the next agenda item. As is required by law, Governor Ducey also released his proposed fiscal year 2020 state budget on Friday, January 18th. The proposed fiscal 2020 executive budget increases funding for K-12 education by $636.7 million. This includes increasing formula funding from the general fund for inflation, enrollment increases, and related adjustments by $381.4 million. The governor's executive budget includes the second year of funding for the 20% by 2020 teacher pay raise plan that began this year, the continued restoration of district additional assistance, which is also known as capital funding, the inclusion of more high-performing schools in the results-based funding formula, the creation of a new incentive program for career and technical education to address workforce needs, the addition of resources for school safety needs, including school resource officers and counselors, and the proactive funding of new school construction and the renewal of existing school budgets. So there's a lot in that proposed budget. Now, we're early in the process, and we're reviewing on a daily basis a lot of information. Over the next few months, I will keep you informed of changes related to the governor's proposed budget, as well as bills that may impact our district.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there any additional questions, comments?
I do have one question.
Sure.
I'm not trying to make this
Ms.
last longer.
Underhill?
I noticed one of our committees on our website is the legislative network, community legislative network, and I just was curious when they come into play, what that is, if we have that. I just was curious about it.
Good evening, Mrs. Underhill, President Ceja Martinez. The Community Legislative Network is a committee we previously held, so you can see all of their past meeting notices, agendas, and all documentation posted on the website. It was an initiative by Dr. Santarelli, so we did hold that committee during his time. I do not believe it was something that was continued during Dr. Stifler's tenure with our district.
Okay, great, thanks. Just seems like a lot for you to have to do on top of your job. So anyway, thank you.
Any additional comments? The board for
Any additional comments? That's a repeat. We look forward to the updates as we go through this process.
Well, thank you. And our next agenda item is actually an information report from our budget team. It's joined this evening by our budget team member, Veronica Fabella, who is also a budget analyst for the district and a very important member of the Business Services Department.
Thank you, and especially staying with us through this process.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, President Ceja Martinez, Governing Board members, and Superintendent Palace Thompson. As Michelle stated, my name is Veronica Fabella. I am one of the budget DAC analysts here at the office, and I'm also a member of the budget team. Today, I'm here to give you an update on our first budget team meeting that took place on January 14th. The team consists of 31 district-wide members from certified, classified, and administrative groups. At the meeting, there was a discussion related to expectations and priorities for the team, as well as review of the recommendations made by the budget team last year. In addition, the district CFO, Ms. Michelle Myers, provided a school finance overview, reviewed the 2018 annual financial report with the team, and provided general information on the fiscal year 2020 budget development process. The budget team will meet again on January 28th, and we look forward to providing you with updates from the upcoming meetings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by the governing board? Thank you for staying, yes. Okay, moving on to 9.2, Budget, Facilities, Planning, Construction, and Reports. All viewable to the public online. 9.3, District Budget Report for the month of November 2018. As well viewable online. And 9.4, Report on upcoming meetings and events. We are in the second half of the year. Ms. Aries, is there anything you would like to address?
Very quickly, if I could, and I'm hopeful it did make it on there. Thank you, Ms. Abishan, for adding our spring field trip that is coming up. So it will highlight Raymond S. Kellis High School and then two of our signature programs, so Heritage Elementary School and Santa Fe Elementary. So we hope that our community will join us on that trip.
Thank you. And if just leave the mic on for just one more moment. I know it's not on here, but governing board members, there are 2 PTSO dinners. And Danielle, you shared the dates with me, and I apologize. Do you mind? All governing board members are welcome to attend. It's a great opportunity to interact with our PTSOs and booster clubs. I know it's going to be at Ira Murphy and Cactus High School.
That's right. Thank you, Mrs. Ceja Martinez. Our next one is Ira Murphy Elementary School, and I believe that one is on Wednesday, February 6th. And then our next opportunity, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong date on that one, wrong day on my calendar. That one's on Wednesday, January 30th. So next week on that one is the one that will take place at Ira Murphy. And then our last one of the year is in April. We'll make sure to get that date out to you well in advance, but it will take place at Cactus High School.
Perfect. And if you are interested, please let Danielle know, Ms. Ari know, so that we can post publicly. Excellent. Moving on to 10.1, board to address, readdress agenda items.
No.
All right. Looks like nobody wants to. Sorry, gentlemen. Ms. Myers. 10.2, draft agenda for February 14, 2019, and regular board meeting with executive session. This one, I want to continue to highlight your guys' feedback on being structured, and we're working on the time, but very strategic. And we, as governing board president, clerk, and our superintendent, have created first quarter agendas to be focused on our strategic plan, specifically stewardship of resources. Transitioning to second quarter, we're going to focus on student success. And we will continue with third and fourth quarter, but we've heard your feedback, and that is the focus. 10.3, request for agenda items for future governing board meetings. Ms. Underhill.
Yes, I would like to request that we possibly review our policy for how community advisory committee members are selected and also the guidelines for composition of those committees.
Second?
Excellent. Any additional? Ms. Sundrell? No, that's it. Ms. Pingarelli?
I have one this evening. I wanted to see a presentation on the difference between the Met versus the CTE or WestMec, and also the new presentation that we had at for Cactus High School, just to see what their potential overlaps are or their differences and highlight those differences.
Can we elaborate as well to that costs? I know we for the Cactus High School, there's not very much, but if there's any type of base point, we could start with some financials with that as well. I would second that. Any additional items? No. Okay. Mr. Sandoval? Ms. Stone? Okay, I do have one, which, Mr. Sandoval, you brought up, the suspensions. Alternative to suspensions. I didn't see it. We talked about positive behavior intervention support, but not specifically suspensions.
I'll second that.
Okay, I don't have any additional items. Last call, Governing Board. All right. 11.1. I move to agenda meeting at 8:38. And we have a second by Ms. Pingarelli. All in favor say aye. 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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.